wanted to talk about policy strategy broadly, because you obviously have a lot of involvement in that. And so with how we form policy, what I'm most interested in is the sustainable use and production of energy, because obviously you came to the class and you talked about sustainable production of energy, moving away from these fossil fuel type things, the more polluting side, and going to renewables. When you try to implement a policy for that, my first question is, should it be more aimed at the producers, the consumers, or both when you're trying to make it more feasible? An example, I guess, would be when we talk about how cigarettes were never really banned. They didn't really force the health impacts to go away from those. They kind of imposed the cost of reducing the overall community health negatives onto consumers by doing things like sin taxes and by restricting where they could smoke. And I imagine it would lean more towards a cost on the producers of energy side for you, but I want to hear your thoughts on
that. It's a great question, and everybody has a role to play in decarbonization. There's no doubt about that. We all have a role. However, we have generally focused the majority of our work on trying to require the owners of these facilities to internalize the costs that they currently externalize. So air emissions, that's an externality. Water pollution, it's an externality. Climate pollution, that's an externality. We want them to have to account for that in the cost of their product. And then you put that on that levels a playing field for everybody. So when you have, for example, the Rosebud mine having to clean up the water in the area or make sure that they're not destroying the watershed downstream for agricultural uses, that costs the company money to fix those problems. And when you consider the real fuel costs for whether it's coal or whether it's oil and gas or something else, and you compare that to the fuel costs of wind or solar, where your fuel costs are free, you are creating a more competitive market for those other resources that don't have the same external costs.
That makes sense. I think that actually is something I hadn't even thought about before, because it does help make the market more competitive if you force some of the energy to actually have to pay for what it's causing externally. Kind of drives the price that people wouldn't like. Something else I'm curious about is what you think is, if either a specific policy that you believe is the thing most holding back the sustainable either use or production of energy in Montana, or what you think, I guess, the overarching problem is that you're trying to target. If it's a specific policy that you'd like to more point the tip of the spear at, or if it's like maybe a moral or social concept that you're working at.
That's a really hard question, because I don't believe in silver bullets. I don't believe it's any one thing that's going to solve the problems that we face today. So to me, let's think about it. I guess one of the things I wouldn't say it's the very most important, but it is one of the most important, would be water pollution, and making sure that companies that extract resources have to pay, again, back to they have to pay for their externalities. When they dewater creeks, when they hammer them and turn them into potential Superfund sites, they shouldn't be able to just leave that mess behind by restructuring the corporation and putting those costs into some little entity off to the side that they're no longer responsible for, and letting that company declare bankruptcy, which is exactly what we're seeing with Talon Energy right now, for example. One of the owners of Colstrip, who has been arguing to keep the plant operating for decades into the future. And Talon was created to shed the liabilities of Pennsylvania Power and Light. Pennsylvania Power and Light, PPL, created Talon to take its uneconomic assets off of its hands. Talon became an entity in about 2014. It is a co-owner of Colstrip. It has no interest in closing the plant. It's responsible for the coal ash problems at the plant, which are going to be hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to resolve. And Talon just last week we found out is looking towards bankruptcy. And if Talon can't clean up the mess, if Talon cannot keep that plant operating, making sure that water quality is protected long after the company is gone, then I think the whole system has failed. So if you can force these companies while they still exist, before they go bankrupt and shed their liabilities onto us as taxpayers, I think you're going to see a change in the company's interest in finding less polluting resources like wind and solar storage technologies that are, right now coming onto the market in droves.
Do you think, given the timeline that we're on, it might become, or at least it's feasible, it might become a matter of having to make switching to the green energy more profitable for these groups, or maybe even work into the monetary interests of these damaging groups just because it's the last thing that we have left? That's something I've thought about, just because I worry you don't have enough time to fix the capitalist problem or fix the problem with the green energy, and you just have to pay the person that did the wrong thing and then deal with that part later.